Hi there, it's March, and this month we are going to do a deep dive on managing all of the paperwork in our house because it's something that just gets out of hand real fast. There is so much of it all the time: mail and junk mail coming through the door every day, school forms, bills, invitations, important documents. It's just endless. Over the past few years, I found a solid routine to stay on top of the paperwork in our house now. So let's get straight into it, and I'll share it with you here today. So, first of all, having a system is essential. Every single item that comes into your house for the first time is homeless until you find a place for it. And that's fine because most new things have an obvious home. New clothes go into the wardrobe, a new bottle opener goes into the drawer in the kitchen, milk goes into the fridge. But with paperwork, a lot of it is usually needed out where it will either act as a reminder for you or you'll need the information off of it really soon. That's why paperwork becomes such a problem so easily, because paperwork often remains homeless until it's not needed anymore, which can be days, weeks, or even months later. Having a system in place to deal with every item of paperwork that comes into your home makes this all so much more manageable, and it takes very little time at all. So, first of all, if it's junk mail or it's just rubbish, then throw it straight into the recycling bin. I know this sounds obvious, but how many of us are guilty of sifting through the mail and leaving it on the side by the door to look at in more detail later? Just take all of the junk mail and pop it straight into the bin when you're going through your mail. In the same vein, if you can take the details you need from some paperwork and store it somewhere sensible on your phone, then you can throw the physical paperwork version out. For example, a hospital appointment, you can probably input the date straight into your calendar on your phone, add the address or ward or department details into the notes section and the name of the medical professional you're due to see, then you can get rid of it. I appreciate that some paperwork is better off being shredded for confidentiality reasons, and I suggest having an empty drawer or a box where you put all of these into and then periodically just shred the lot. Either way, sift whatever paperwork you can out of your home as soon as possible. And if paperwork doesn't fall into the trash category, then it will fall into one of the three categories, which are things that need dealing with as soon as possible, such as bills, invitations, and any fines you've gotten. These are things that tend to float around the most and then get lost at the most inconvenient times. Next are the things that do need dealing with, but maybe not just yet. So this might include appointments for hospital dates that are many months in the future, or insurance that you need to shop around for and renew in a month or so. And as before, these things float around and then can't be found when you actually need them. And finally, there are things that don't need any action from you, but just need storing in perpetuity. Passports, birth certificates, and driving license are all great examples of this kind of paperwork. They just need to be filed away for whenever they may be needed, but they are often difficult to find at crunch time because people don't file them away properly or don't file them at all. So, first, let's look at dealing with the paperwork items that need managing as soon as possible. These things are best stored somewhere that is visible and accessible. For us, we store our paperwork in this category in one of those wall hung magazine holders, and each family member has one slot for their paperwork. This is part of our family command center, and you can Google that if you haven't heard of them before and want to see some examples, because they're really handy for staying organized as a family. But you can't just shove paperwork in there and call it a day. You need to set yourself a time and a day every week, say every Saturday morning, when you will go to your command center, sift through the papers in there, and check if there is anything you need to action for the week ahead. Choose a day and a time that makes sense for you, set an alarm on your phone if that helps, and make sure you have time to deal with whatever admin comes up for you here. As always, if something can be dealt with immediately instead of being put into the command center, then that is always the preferable option. Just do it now if possible, always. Things that need dealing with later. So these can feel like a really difficult one to manage because they rely on you both remembering to deal with them and being able to find the paperwork when you need it. For that reason, these items may wish to live in a separate section of your command center or another drawer or file or box entirely. Again, you'll need to look through this regularly to see if anything in here is now due. But one thing that can help with these is to put a note or alarm in your calendar on the date or a few days before the date of whatever is due on the paperwork. And this will help you to remember to deal with those things that are in the distant future. If something is going to take a few days or weeks to action, then set the alarm the appropriate amount of time ahead of the date that it's due for. And finally, the items where no action is needed, but you need to store the items in perpetuity and keep safe, such as passports, birth certificates, and driving licenses. These will need to be stored immediately in a safe place. A filing cabinet or folder is great for this, but try to only have one place where your documents are stored, as this will make things easier to find. Make use of dividers with labels on to keep everything separated by type or by family member, and we'll go into this a little bit more in a moment. Of course, none of this will work unless you build the habit of having a system for paperwork in your home. If you follow the rough system that I use here for yourself or something else entirely, whatever it is, just try to make sure that it makes sense to you and it works for your family. Consider the flow of how you move through your home when you first enter it. If you put your short term paperwork upstairs, but don't actually ever go upstairs in your first 5 minutes of arriving home, then that probably isn't the best pace for it. So, considering the flow of your home when you first get home can be essential. If kids empty their school bags in the kitchen, then perhaps the kitchen is the best place for all of those paperwork items. And make sure that your long term filing storage is well organized and well labeled. That's really important. Important documents are usually needed fairly instantaneously when you do, so making sure that you aren't having to sift through an entire box of random documents is pretty decent. It might take an evening to get it organized and set up, but the time it will save you in the long run when the kids are screaming and it's all kicking off is well worth it. You'll only need to set it up once in your lifetime and then just maintain it, so it's not wasted time. Let's look at how to do that next. The filing system that makes sense to your household is the best one. For us, we have a file for each family member, and some of our other categories include travel, work, pets, etc. This is sometimes easiest achieved by going through all of your important documents and putting them into piles of type, and then working out if any make sense to be grouped together or not. And finally, it is highly unlikely that you'll set yourself a system up and then just crack on with it forever. It takes a while to ingrain a habit, so be patient with yourself, and if you notice the piles of paperwork stacking up again, then just start again. It's probably also having a think about why it's all built up again. Did you just get a bit lax on your system, or is there a part of it that doesn't work so well for you that you can try and tweak? Is your command center in the right place or the right room? And perhaps even just the setup and logistics of your life has changed and you need to adjust everything for the new season of your life you're in. We would be naive to think that we don't need to reassess and change things every so often. And that's it for March. I hope that this helps to take some stress out of paperwork. I appreciate that there is some setup work to be done on this one, but the benefits are worth it. Paperwork is such a massive source of clutter in the home, so getting on top of it can be a game changer for you. Next month, we will look at spring cleaning and how to make that way less stressful and perhaps even a bit enjoyable. Thank you so much for being here. And if we aren't already friends on Instagram, then you can find me over there at the Lazy Mum Club. So let's connect. Thanks, and I'll be back next month.